I was actually at the Texas Motor Speedway, and I'm having a Coors Light, and I'm walking in between the motorhomes, and I saw Steve Conaway showing the video of the 2-hour house to a group of people. And I went, play that again. And he played it again, and I went, man, every business principle that I've learned in business is in that story. And Brian goes, what do you mean? I said, you see teamwork, you see collaboration, efficiency, organization, the whole. And I said, you tell the story and I'll put in the business principles. But I just was floored that you can build a 2,300 square foot house, exceeded code in less than 3 hours. And it's 20 years later. So that's why I wanted you to be here to tell kind of your perspective. When did you first find out about it? Just tell me what you recollect in that story.
Yeah, so going prior to October 1st, 2005, Brian came to us, and I've known Brian since, I guess he was a teenager, since he was racing cars, okay? So he came to us, and at the time that was Transit Mixed Concrete, owned by Trinity Industries. Came to Dickie Shillab and I, the late Dickie Shillab and I, and told us what he wanted to do. And we thought, well, that's a great project. You know, we'll supply the concrete, and we're probably going to, pour it the day before or something, or a couple of days before, and then you're going to build the house. No, we're going to pour the concrete as part of breaking the record. And I've got penciled in, says Brian, about 24 minutes for you. If you can give me 22 minutes, I'd love it. And, Dickie and I are looking at each other and flabbergasted, to say the least. But at that point, we went to work. And it was a commitment from that point on.
I mean, how can you get committed, because he saw a house in California that was being built in 3 hours and 44 minutes and 59 seconds. And the more he looked at that project, that he realized that he can build a house in less time. And in fact, he figured with enough volunteers that he can build a 2,300 square foot house that exceed code. And then he comes to you. What made you feel like you can make that happen?
Well, if you know Brian very well, when he sets his mind to something, it's going to happen. So to be a part of that process was not only an honor to be asked, because he had confidence in our company and us as individuals to make that happen, but huge undertaking. It was a huge undertaking. I did a little bit of math this past week and of the number of hours. I wished we would have logged the number of hours that we spent. Thousands. Probably somewhere between 4,500 and 5,000 man hours. Now that includes lots of people. Includes probably a committee of 10 or 12 guys. Then all the support staff that helped. Conforming the mix design or the recipe, that this is not, this is a residential project, right? But it's not residential concrete. It's residential concrete on steroids times 7 or 8.
Did you got like a bunch of guys from all over the country, or did you have just more Tyler people? What did the committee look like?
So our committee the core group was based out of Tyler, because that's where we're going to do all of the testing. That's where we're going to batch the concrete. That's the core group. We employed admixture people, material people, corporate QC people, our local QC people. So the network was fairly large, but our core group of 10 or 12 was right, in the Tyler area.
What was your challenges the most? Of course, getting into 22 minutes, I get that. But what were the biggest challenges, or what I can't figure out? Well, you had to identify local tradesmen that had the vision also. Mm-hmm. But what made you believe you could do it? That's what.
Yeah, the key to that is leading, and we had a great leader. The late Dickie Shillab was my mentor for a number of years, and he believed we could do it. If he believed we can do it, that meant he believed in all of us. So, you don't want to let your leader down, and then ultimately Brian, of course, but the challenge of, just like in anything in life, that foundation is the most important, right? I mean, we all go through life, and your relationships with your spouse, your friends, your employees, your coworkers, that foundation is based, is the basis of a relationship. So the same thing with building a house. But the fun part of that is gathering up and throwing ideas at each other, failing miserably many times, including 2 weeks prior to the actual event. We failed miserably. We couldn't even get started on a house because we couldn't get the concrete out of the truck. But going back to the drawing board and figuring out what we could do differently.
Let me ask you this. What inspired Dick? Is it because Brian had already thought about it and had a plan that he showed him how they can get it done, and then he realized that if he can pull his part off, that it could come to fruition? Is that kind of what?
That's kind of what it was. But there was a special bond between the Conaways and myself and Dickie Shillab. In that relationship, I think Steve probably helped sell it to Dickie as well. But yeah, a lot of it had to do with that. Yeah.
Well, you just talked about the challenge of the previous house, and it failed miserably. What changes do you make? Because part of life is how do you handle failure, and then a team of people. So what was everybody thinking that day, and then the process all the way to the original date?
Yeah, so the goal was to build a house, I think maybe even two, and we backed off to one, and I don't remember the particulars of that. But we brought concrete from the east side of Tyler to the west side of Tyler. It was the mixed design as we had come up with that was going to set in 22 minutes. The problem is you've got a 30-minute run, and that's if you make all the red lights. So we came up with an idea of, in the concrete industry, we call it putting it to sleep. So there's some chemical you can put in the concrete to put it to sleep. Well, the mix was so strong and had so many different admixtures, it didn't work. We actually couldn't get the concrete out of the first truck. So we lost the drum and everything. That was about a $30,000 loss, not counting the concrete in it. So that was plan B number one we had to address. Number two was the traffic, because that truck got stopped at almost every red light coming around the loop. So we went back to the drawing board, and we decided, hey, we can't put any of the admixtures in at the plant. We're going to have to do it on site, which meant we had to reconstruct all of our team. We had to have 3 or 4 members, team members, for every truck, and I believe there were 9 trucks that we loaded with 9 yards, and that was to make sure we had enough. Move the testing lab to the site, because we did do testing. Then we had to employ the police department to give us a funeral escort through town so we didn't hit red lights. So that was in 2 weeks we had to figure all that out. And, it obviously worked, but lots of hours went into reaching out to people, and calling in some favors. And then we had to employ more volunteers. So you've got to go sell that to some employees. So we brought guys in from various plants around the area, plant managers. I mean, we shut down operations pretty much in every area within, 30 or 40 miles, so we could have enough people to administer admixes on site.
One of the things that I had heard, that there were resumes that, that the truck drivers applied for a job, and part of their reference was, I drove for the 2-hour house.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people took pride to make that happen, to
Yeah.
be part of something really magical, I think. I've always felt like, a group of people, if you're working towards a bigger game, people want to step up and play in a big game. And this is the biggest game that really united the city.
It did. There were, if the stands, I don't know how many thousands of people were there, but just looking at the video, I recollect all of the people that were in the stands. We actually had drivers that wanted to volunteer their time, and we had so many of them that wanted to do that throughout our region. We gave it to the longest tenured drivers because they know concrete. And they've been trained. All of us had ACI, American Concrete Institute training, and we wanted those guys driving the trucks because they know what we're trying to do.
I mean, I tell you, accepting the responsibility and a challenge of that. Did you have naysayers from the first round to the second round?
Oh, you have a few, and there may have been some on the committee that may have been, man, this is not ever going to happen. But you know what? Those were the minority. And once they jumped on board and we started making some progress to developing this mix design or recipe, it's just like baking a cake. You follow this recipe just like it is and it comes out a certain way. Same thing with concrete. You have a mix design. You don't just throw sand, cement, water, admixtures, and aggregates in a truck and it just comes out concrete. It has a mix design so that it performs a certain way.
The thing is, when you get people to have that creative thinking and that planning, because the foundation didn't work, it wasn't going to work. And for that thing to dry in 22 minutes and then putting the walls up, and we're talking about heating and cooling systems, countertops, roof, floors, interior doors and baseboards, heating and cooling system, the landscape, the fence. I mean, it is pretty.
Coordination was amazing.
To me, we're talking 579 volunteers to pull off a near impossible project. The thing I always is, as I was writing down a bunch of principles that had to happen to pull that off, and we're talking about this house. Let's just kind of put this on here. We're talking about this house. You can't put the roof on. You got to have the foundation before it all starts. And the coordination of all this, as I was writing down all the principles, well, you can't do without communication. To anything, you can't inspire and motivate people without communication. So I was kind of going, and you're talking about just communicate. When you talked about the length of time it took and the hours you spent, describe that.
Yeah. So once we got started and putting, people on committee, and I just know because I had so much to do with every phase of it, and what I spent personally, I'm thinking that in the 40 weeks or 42 weeks we had to prepare, we had in excess of probably 4,500 to 5,000 man hours involved, and that's from the start to the finish. That's volunteers on the day of and everything, which is tremendous. I figured myself I probably spent 8 hours a week on it, just logistics. The mix design part went kind of this direction, and logistics and volunteers went this direction. And then we had subcommittees within our committee. Then, of course, we met, once every couple of weeks, building up to the day of. But I'll tell you, the morning of, it's like going into your first theater program and being the lead actor. We were on plant. We were on site at 3 a.m., feeding our guys breakfast, going over last minute. We had all of our mechanics, plant personnel there to make sure everything was running, truck mechanics. We had everything in place to not fail.
The thing is, I guess as leaders, you think, he didn't tell you how to do your job. He just told you the amount of time that you had and how that fit into the big game,
Well, that was the good thing about Brian. Brian has always been very good at coordination and planning and leading and empowering. And that was the key to this, is empowering us and he trusted us to pull this feat off.
And if you think about it, we're talking 20 years ago, and I don't think anybody's ever going to break that record. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah.
So
it's the Nolan Ryan record.
So how does it? So rolling over 20 years, did you use the same cement mix in other projects in the future that helped you become a better concrete company, and how did that impact your business?
Yeah. So going into, as we develop this mix, and there's a lot of proprietary stuff obviously that goes along with that I'm not at liberty to talk about, but yes, that mix was actually introduced to several projects and maybe some derivatives thereof, but it was an industry leading mix that was, I believe, ended up trademarked by Trinity for any kind of application like this. The funny thing about all of that is we didn't know what direction that was going, and it was actually I believe it was Texas Aggregates. This project and what we did was actually a feature in that. It may have been a cement industry, publication, but it was actually featured in one of those publications.
One thing I believe is that the human spirit is alive and well when you make the game big enough. And it's amazing. Like you said, nobody got compensated. Nobody got paid. People spent a year and a half planning and wanted to be part of this near impossible project. How did you apply it to your personal life? What did you take away from it that kind of helped you looking back? And
a lot of these characteristics have always been instilled in me, but it just took them a little, maybe a step further. But I think the biggest thing that and I made some phone calls this week to some folks that are still living and still around the industry that haven't retired or whatever, and we had some conversation. But what we all took away from this project was that with the proper leadership and coordination, and we dealt with, this house was all about competition. There were competitors working for the same goal. We can make life work, and that's what we took away from this. If we gathered up as a group, we can do this. And we were all pulling the same direction. We didn't have tug of wars going this way or that way. We all pulled the same direction and all pulled our weight.
There's an old philosophy that says when your visions are clear, your decisions are easy. And it's amazing that to have this already planned out and said, okay, here's how we're going to do it. Another group was the garage door. Hey, you got 10 minutes to put the garage door in. No, we can't do that. And then they figured out a way to do it in 3 minutes. So sometimes you got to be challenged to liberate our own entrapped mind from telling us that things can't be done and things are possible when you really work together to make it a reality.
It was a lot of fun to do that, and we all learned a lot about each other. I mean, we worked together, worked very closely together, but to do a project like this together, we learned a lot about each other.
Does the Home Builders Association really know a lot about the details of this project, or you think it kind of faded away over time? Or
I think through leadership, I think it kind of faded away a little bit, but I think this is going to rejuvenate some of that, and I'm really hoping it does because, TABA has been I've been a member of TABA, and it's been a big part of my life for about 35 years, and so when I spoke to some of the guys that you interviewed maybe last week. It kind of brought back some of those memories because we were 20 years younger then. Some of those guys were, fresh out of college, so without having to tell my age or anything, right? But 20 years, gosh. And it's great to rejuvenate this because it was a big deal. It was really a big deal.
I think it's a metaphor. The reason why I like the house analogy, I'll just relate it to me, but, the planning process, you can't get your CPA, your tax and insurance, investments and retirement and all that stuff work together until you know the vision of what you want out of life. And then it's all pieces of the puzzle to make that happen. Well, that's the house analogy. And I look at the house as, what do you want your personal life to look like? What do you want your house to look like? What do you want your business life to look like? What do you want your business to look like? What do you want your community to look like? And then we work it backwards, and actually I was at the East Texas, where the East Texas Fair was over there by the Harvey Hall. Well, they moved it outside the loop, and they got a major project out there, but it's people are coming together as a community and making it happen, and it's amazing what we can make happen. And that's what I'm hoping that this 2-hour house, that we encourage people to become future leaders and to learn some of the life lessons, that how you get 579 volunteers to work together to build a 2,300 square foot house. Even when I say it over and over again, it's kind of amazing.
I know.
And I would ask groups in any industry, can it be done? And most people go, oh, no, there's no way you can be done. It's blah, blah, blah. You can't get the concrete to dry in 22 minutes, and you just prove it. the concrete mix, do they use that now in different
No, I
areas?
don't know what they, I don't know how much they use that. I think maybe derivatives thereof. I think they introduced it way back when. I'm no longer in the concrete industry. I'm 2 years removed, but I still keep up with it quite a bit because it was a big part of my life for 20 plus years. Even in college, while I was going to college, I finished concrete. So I worked in the concrete business on the operating end of it, right? But I think they introduced some of that to maybe TxDOT. TxDOT has some specific mixes for highway patch, and I think they might have used some of this. But yeah, they may use some derivatives thereof. The issue with this mix is it, as it stood, was very unaffordable because of the performance of it. I mean, in the concrete business, you have a balance between performance and finishability. So in a residential mix, you have residential concrete finisher, even in commercial. You have to perform, the concrete has to perform to a certain PSI, 3,000, 3,500, whatever it is, but it also has to be able to be finished. So the spectrum, being performance related, has virtually zero finishability because of the set time, the 22 minutes. I mean, basically, we put admixtures, and you can watch the video and see us chunking admixtures up in buckets, and all of that was coordinated. I mean, we had so many seconds to get buckets up the ladder and into the drum, and so many rotations, and everybody dumped concrete. That's how coordinated we were, because if this truck dumped 15 seconds before this one, the set time's going to be different. That's how detailed that mix was. So, from there, you can't finish it. So you just basically have to screed it off. We did take some tests. We had one truck that we sent out there extra just in case we needed extra concrete, but they also tested that truck. I think you'd find interesting what the breaks were on that concrete. So your typical 28-day break in concrete, that's the norm, okay? For a commercial mix, they ask you for a 3,500 PSI 28-day break, something like that. So they did a 1 hour break on, they took cylinders, they took about 20 cylinders. 1 hour break was at 2,500. And so forth and so on, that at 28 days, they could not break the cylinders, which meant it was at least 10,000 PSI. So we knew that at 2,500, it's going to be gaining strength. And so they took another cylinder at like 2 hours. Well, by 2 hours, they're putting drywall up and trimming, right? So at 2 hours, it was like 3,200 PSI. So we're going the right direction. But yeah, 28 days was 10,000 PSI.
Yeah,
so the concrete's not going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I had heard TxDOT used some of the cement mix to dry its roads a lot faster. And so, innovation, and you never know which way it's going to go. You just go and make it happen. But
yeah.
But spending all those hours, and it's 579 volunteers, and also just to have meetings and have constructive meetings and get everybody on the same page. There's a lot of lessons there, and teamwork and collaboration, and how do you communicate that? I think that the more I'm observing, you got to have communication skills to be able to inspire and motivate people to believe in themselves what can be done.
Yeah, because something like this, that how many naysayers were out there. There were a lot. There were a lot of naysayers.
What would you say to other people that was a naysayer that you felt like that's a life lesson that you would want to share, even your kids and grandkids, or any lessons that you learned from this project?
Yeah, and I've actually shared some of this. My older son was about 8 or 9 at the time, and he was actually out there. And I told him, I said, the thing about this is we failed miserably, time and time again. When we started out thinking that we had something close and we couldn't get it to to operate like we wanted it to. And then the day, it was 2 weeks before, you're going to go through those failures. And we did, miserably. The day of was the day that we really shined. Don't ever give up on what your dream is or what the final, the finish line looks like, because there are going to be failures. The failures are what creates your success. And when it makes that success even, more of a success than the failures. It far outweighs the failures. There were a couple of times we were pretty disgruntled.
You have to dig the footings for the foundation before the concrete is poured and finished, so you had to have that all laid out.
That was all done prior, and that was all done with the concrete crew, and I can't remember how many different concrete crews. So they actually could pre-cut forms. They could actually pre-dig the footings, and they had to fill them back in. So it was just a matter of basically lifting it out of there. All the rebar and the mats were already pre-cut. All they had to do was lay them in there. And they were doing that while we were mixing concrete. So that was about a 3 or 4 minute process once that horn blew.
Now, the way I understand it is that a lot of city of inspectors were all involved with the planning process.
Every
wanted to
one
make
of
sure
them.
that it had to exceed code. And so they were all involved in the process. So these meetings really worked it all the way down. Did you have training on the meetings, or just everybody ran their own teams the way they saw fit and got them engaged? But was there any lessons or a template or something to follow to really get everybody on the same page?
Yeah, we just internally we just kind of ran our own meetings. Now, I represented all of us in the meetings with Brian, and then the bigger meetings when we would have larger, quantities of people. But we did everything internally. They were very informal. Hey, what are we going to do this week to change it? What do we, where do we stand? All of the material was donated. All of our time was donated. All of our truck time, everything from our end. To a finance guy, some people would have liked to have had this in their IRA, right? Yeah. But everything was donated, and but we did all of our own meetings, in house.
I tell you, people do want to help on something that's got a big cause. It's pretty amazing, and the house sold the next day, and it went to, I think, Habitat for Humanity is what it was. A couple of different groups.
Yeah, there was I think about $30,000 that was donated to 5 or 6 different agencies.
Think about how much time that was spent on that whole thing. And we're talking about concrete to be dried. You got the roof, had the HVAC and electrical in the roof. We were talking about interior doors and baseboards. I just want to emphasize again, you're talking about 2,300 square foot house built in 3 hours. How do you coordinate and communicate with 600 volunteers who have less than 3 hours to work together to build a 2,300 square foot house? That's pretty darn amazing.
A lot of
and
team
I keep
leaders.
saying that over and over again because, until you see it, sometimes I think we're human creatures of the eye. So when we say teamwork, people will picture teamwork in their own mind of what they've seen. But when you see it in this house, and people, that's another thing I want to talk about was the concrete. You had the flags was a form of communication. So it's not just what we say. Talk about the flags and the first lesson and what you learned that.
Yeah.
Elaborate on that.
So the flags came in, after we failed miserably that 2 weeks prior. So we decided that we had to do everything on site. Virtually the only thing that we did at the plant was batch the dry materials in the truck and add a little bit of water to start the process of the cement molecules, hydration. That was it. No admixtures or anything. Getting to the site was police escort. That was Plan B2 to get us there. So then we had a gentleman up on the sky lift with flags, and so if we couldn't hear, we looked for flags, and the flags signified what we were supposed to be doing. Are we supposed to be, this color meant we're putting in admixtures. This color meant that we're not. This color meant that we're still rotating the drums to mix. And then at one point we sounded another horn to stop the mixing and to start pouring concrete. And all of those trucks had to pour at the same time, like I was mentioning earlier, because if they didn't, once that concrete hit the ground, it was going to set. And if you left your boots in it, they were going to have to cut them out because it was cooking, and it wasn't hot temperature-wise because it had so much admixture in it, but it did what it needed to do.
I mean, to pick a date, October 1st, and then you have to have the right temperature. You have to have all the materials waiting on site. And, of course, then you had the hurricane that happened 2 weeks prior to that, Katrina, and then make sure you've got all the
one of the things that we actually mentioned one of the things that we actually were concerned about was overhydration of our dry materials, because we had we had to have the water temperature, which all of our mixed water was done with ice, melted ice. So I think every truck probably had 700 or 800 pounds of ice in it as the initial mixed water. Everything else was going to be admixture. So yeah, you mentioned that, and that was one of our concerns. So we had guys out there with loaders turning all of our material over to help it dry the 2 weeks prior to that.
What about the day of the event? Of course, you have to have what degrees did you have to make sure it fell apart?
One of the things that we did in the 40 or 42 weeks prior, we tried to simulate every kind of situation we could as far as temperature, because temperature is a variable that affects concrete. So, October is kind of the start of fall, but it's still kind of a mock summer. And I believe, if I remember, that day was still pretty warm. I mean, I think it was in the 80s. We were really hoping that it would be, probably in the 70s, which, being a little warmer, was going to help us as far as set time. But going through the summer, trying to figure out what that day, and we were looking at 30-day forecast. We were actually contacting weather people to see what the 60 and 90-day forecast is, to try to simulate what the temperature is going to be. Give us 5 degrees if you can. Well, you can't really guess the other weathers, the rains and cold fronts and all that kind of thing. So we went through and got some norms. So to try to test this concrete through the summer, we had to, hey, it might be 80 degrees on October 1st. So we need to test this concrete at like 9 a.m. when it's hitting 80 degrees. We don't want to test it at 2:30 or 3 when it's, 98, 100 degrees. So we had to take all of those things into account and coordinate when all of our testing, and we ran dozens and dozens of test batches. And I can't even, probably close to 100 test batches.
Yeah, with that, knowing that when you had your big group meeting to talk about your part of the puzzle to the big picture, describe how those meetings were when you presented your view, and then you got to listen to what everybody else was doing. I guess everybody left there motivated, didn't they?
Yeah, it was a rally. It's kind of a pep rally. Hey, we're making this progress. We want to stay on this path. What can we do differently? What can I do differently to help you? Do you need some more assistance? Do we need to flip person A to team B or whatever? But yeah, it was a lot like a pep rally, and it was just a gathering of the minds to vent what we needed to vent, and to come up with ideas to create what needed to be created to hit this end goal.
And I tell you what, this last question I'll ask is, what would you want to share in your either business life or personal life that we're talking about? We're kind of mentors to the young generations coming through. What would you want to share that you would like to have a huge takeaway for you personally that you would like to pass on?
In today's world, this younger generation, I would like to see them take the relationship part of it and go forward. We deal a whole lot with electronics, and it's emails and text, and the face-to-face is, to me, it still goes a long way. Face-to-face relationships, face-to-face communication, be genuine, and take that and use that to your advantage when others are using those electronics. I've just always, the older I get, the more I like the face-to-face, and that's just us. That's just what we grew up in. But don't let failure tell you what you're going to do going forward. Let that be part of your success, because it is. Nobody goes out and hits a home run their first at bat. Very few do, right? They're going to strike out. All the all-stars, they have a .333 batting average at the best. It's okay to fail. It's okay to strike out. It's okay to get thrown out, stealing a base. Don't let failure hinder your progress.
And I would add, on top of that, which is beautiful, is that, people, we all have different unique abilities about how we approach things. And I think in the school system, we feel like we have to do it all ourselves. And you can't do great things by yourself. And the 2 Hour House is a perfect example. You got 1 and 1's 11, not 2, when you really work together. And I do believe it's something that we're human creatures of the eye. We believe what we see. And if we can show the example of that story, you're talking about 579 volunteers. No one's getting paid. And they were working on, and industry competitors to band together as volunteers.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. So anyway, I'm just glad you shared. I appreciate the time, and I know this is going to add value in some way. I have no idea, but I think it's our purpose in life, and it's going to come together like a piece of puzzle.
I've enjoyed it. This has been a great, rejuvenated, thought process of mine, and I look forward to seeing the outcome of this.
Yeah, you got it. We'll have a celebration for sure.
Nice. So when you pour a residential foundation or a commercial foundation, basically once you pour the concrete, you have about 4 hours, give or take. That's what, from the time it comes out of the back of the truck to the time they take the last finished trowel off. So 4 hours of time, roughly. So we had to take that and divide it by 8, or whatever, to come up with 22 minutes. And, that's when I was talking about the performance versus the finishability. We just had to have performance. And so while it finished off okay, because of all the admixtures in it and to give it flowability, to get it to set in 22 minutes is just something that your house nor my house would ever, we would never have a house setting. Now, in the summertime, those numbers go from 4 to 3, and those guys go, they go crazy because it's flash setting on them. And they make admixtures to slow that process down. As in cold weather, they have admixtures to speed that process up. Well, in the fall, they had to have lots of admixture to speed the process up. And a lot of that had to do with taking a lot of the water out of the mix. Anybody in the concrete business knows that water is also a retarder. And the more water that's added to the mix, the more it will retard. It'll also do a lot of other things. It'll, hinder your strength. It'll hinder, the set, obviously. So chemicals helped a whole lot with this. Yeah, so technically, we had people. We had people with 30 years experience. We had people that were fresh out of college with, concrete chemistry degrees. We employed corporate people. We employed admix people. The technical part was covered. It's the challenges is to get everybody together at the same time. And a lot of it was done, even then we had email. We didn't have a lot of social media or anything like that, right? But we did have email. We had video. We didn't have Teams, but we had video calls and that sort of thing. But getting everybody together, once everybody was together, we were all on the same page. If Dickie Shillab says we're going to do it, we're going to do it, because he fully believed in all of us. He believed in himself too. And coincidentally, Dickie was a college football player, so a lot of this stuff was instilled in him.
I don't think Conaway would have had confidence unless he had the confidence in you and the leaders that we had in Tyler that had vision and passion and they could feel like it could be done. It's pretty amazing. I mean, that's a hell of a home builders association. It damn sure increased the membership that following year, didn't it?
Well, it did, and it's increased over the number of years, and it's a wonderful organization. I'll always tout it. It's been, I don't sell everybody in that organization everything, but you know what? I've made some fantastic friends. Yeah. Whether they buy products from me or not, it's okay. Yeah. I'm invested in them, and they're invested in me. We're invested in each other, and the local Home Builders Association is much like this team of people. It's a lot of competitors, but we all gather for one cause, and that's the organization.